What is going on, party people, and welcome to episode 22 of the Whatnauts Review Show, where each week we have a new story to talk about, whether it be a comic book, a movie, a TV show, an anime, a manga, who knows. We rate it, we watch it, we do what we have to do, we come back here and talk about it. My name is Kyle Springer, and joining me for the first time on the review show is Jess Beaver.
Hello.
Jess, how are you?
I'm good. I spent the day with my kid sister, who is almost 16, just hanging out. So, having fun.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. I had a very typical, standard, boring Monday. And then, like, the last 2 hours have been very weird for me. You know how stuff like Instagram and Twitter will cater ads to your search history and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's weird.
So most of them I'm sitting there like, okay, that's to be expected, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned I was at a party and I'll get an ad for alcohol or something. Today I got one that was like, it was some documentary on like the Hollow Earth theory and stuff like that, and how like aliens are real and they're living inside the Earth. They've been here for hundreds of years. I'm like, what did I search something that I don't remember that caused
amazing.
this? What did I do to cause this? So that was interesting. And then I left work and I didn't know it was supposed to rain, but I got caught in the rain walking home.
Oh, fun.
Which was not fun. So, yeah, that was my day. But here we are, recording the review show. It's a Monday night. We don't normally record Monday nights. We normally record Sunday mornings, or I guess Sunday at noon for me. But Melissa, who is usually here hosting the show with me, is in the process of moving to a new apartment. I think she was last night or the night before she texted me. It was like, hey, so I'm moved in, but this is like literally my first night here, so nothing is unpacked. So I was like, okay, cool. But she wanted to take this week off so she could focus on all of that stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. She's actually not going to be here next week either. And Jess, you're going to be joining me again.
Yeah.
Back to back.
Hit me. Hope you all like
Hell
me.
Yes. You'll do fine.
Yeah.
So let's see. We picked a graphic novel to talk about this week that I before pitching it to you, I really hadn't heard of this book. I had no idea what this was. I was looking on things I was looking on Comixology Unlimited to find things I could pitch for the show, and I came across a certain graphic novel, and it looked really, really cool. And it was like, oh, this is from the same creator that I think it said that their first graphic novel was the one we're talking about today,
Mm-hmm.
Iron or the War After. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I like the one I just saw, but I think I kind of want to go back and do the first one that they made and just see what that's like. Who knows? I could be wrong. It might not be their first one, but that's the thing I have in my head, so that's what I'm going to stick with.
I think it's their first one. I think.
Cool.
Pretty sure.
So this book, Iron or the War After, is written and drawn by S.M. Vidori. I believe that's how you pronounce their last name. I'm not sure. But I gave you 3 options. Jess, I'm not sure if you've figured out how we pitched the stuff each week yet, from week to week, but Melissa and I take turns pitching each other 3 options, and then we pick from those. So you were actually the one that picked this of my three options. So my first question to you is, why did you pick this one?
Um,
What stood out about it that made you want to talk about this one?
yeah, so mostly it was kind of process of elimination, honestly, because the other option, well, there were two other options. One of them was a seemingly scary movie on Netflix, and I don't do scary movies. I don't do the
It
dark. We
was
have a nightlight on my toilet.
crime. Actually, speaking of that, that's another ad that I saw. It was like something you could light your toilet bowl with. I was like, that looks really
It's
cool.
rad.
And then I was like, why am I thinking of spending my money on this stuff when I can just turn on the lights in the bathroom?
Yeah.
But yeah. So you didn't want to do. I think that one was Shimmer Lake was the one. It's kind of a crime. It looked it looked like it had some scary moments. It looked like it was kind of a dark comedy.
Yeah, it seemed intriguing, but I don't really do scary or thrillers, so I was like, maybe not for the first thing. I don't want the whole review to be like,
Sure.
I hated it because I was terrified. Um, and then the other thing, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it looked like it may have been a manga, and I can't handle that format for some
Not a
reason.
fan of manga.
Huh?
Not a fan of manga.
No, yeah. I
Good to
nothing
know.
against it. I just like I when I started working at the comic shop when I was 18, which was my first job, I'd never read a comic, and I found that really hard to get into from regular
Oh,
books,
okay.
and so I just like haven't been
Interesting.
able to get in to manga yet. Like I can't, my brain can't handle that format for some reason.
Yeah. So you've mentioned it. You were actually on the past 2 weeks of episodes of the Captain's Log, which by time this goes live in public, the one we just recorded, uh, like 2-3 days ago, should
Hmm.
be live. But one of those episodes did not make it public because we had a lot of technical difficulties and lost stuff. But yeah, you mentioned that you used to work at a comic book store and stuff like that. So that's cool. I've not had that experience. But what is the shop that you used to work at? Because I know they're a pretty big store.
Yeah, so I used to work at, and this is where my friend and fellow podcaster Eric Mannix works at, but I used to work at Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics, which is in Lacey, Washington, and I believe it's one of, if not the biggest comic and game shop in the Pacific Northwest. It's two stories
That's awesome.
at this point.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of them adding on some kind of renovation, something.
Yeah, they had a second floor that didn't extend all the way to the side wall, so they extended it all the way.
Okay, gotcha.
Hmm. It was rad.
Sounds good. Um, yeah. So I kind of described this book to you as like spy drama done in watercolors with artwork that kind of reminded me of like a mix between Miyazaki and like the Legend of Korra animation style.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know how well that holds up now that we've read the book, um, but it does. I feel like the book was kind of bleak, and we'll get into that in a bit here. But I feel like if the book would have been a lot busier, or maybe had some more like line work involved in it, I think it would have had that real strong like Legend of Korra kind of simple line work
Hmm.
to it. There was something about the way he drew faces that was like, that kind of reminds me of something I would see in Legend of Korra, but it was a real fast thing, so that might not hold up well. But yeah, so what did you think of this book? What were your kind of general thoughts on this now that you've read the whole thing?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I haven't read a comic in a while that I don't own and have already read like 5 times, just because I now live
What
about.
was the last one you read?
Oh, let me look at my shelf, which is conveniently right here. I think.
I have mine like right back there too. So
Oh, I have so many comics on my shelf. This might take longer than I thought. It might have been. Oh, it's one called Moonstruck. Um,
okay, I've heard of it.
it's real cute,
Haven't read it.
real adorable. It's the
You guys are watching this on, or if you guys are listening to this as a podcast, you just showed me the book on your camera. So you guys go
Yes.
check out the YouTube one, which has our cameras
but
set up.
it's about queer magical beings, one of whom works in a coffee shop, and it's adorable. So this was a real change of pace from that.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it. I was definitely left with the feeling of like, wow, that was very open-ended, and I feel like there should be like another
Yeah.
trade or another issue, and there's not. And those always kind of like bother me a little bit at first because I really like a solid like this is the end, it's all been resolved. But I can also really appreciate when it just hasn't, and seeing that that worked really well for the story, and I think the kind of
Yeah.
message that was trying to be conveyed.
Yeah, it was good. I really liked it as well. Actually, I read the whole book, and it took me a little bit at the start to kind of get into it and figure out who was who and what was what. But once I did, I was like, yeah, this is great. I really love it. And I got done with the book, and the first thing I did was go on Twitter, and I tweeted at the creator. I was like, this was fantastic. Like, I loved this book. Thank you for the great read. He was like, oh, thanks. Yeah, I had a fun time. It wasn't. I mean, I was about to say it wasn't what I expected, but don't I don't think I really had expectations going into it to be like, okay, it's gonna be like this one thing that I read 2 years ago, you know. So I didn't really have something to compare it to. But I think this was a fascinating read, so I highly recommend it. For those of you guys who are not reading along at home, though, we'll give you a short little elevator pitch, so you guys can kind of know what it is about. So Jess, you'll have to help me out here with this. But it seems like there was some kind of civil war in whatever country that these anthropomorphic characters were living in. And the side that lost, there's kind of still like a resistance group still trying to fight and make something happen. And one of the characters, a rabbit, he had stole some kind of plans, I guess to do some kind of big prison break, I think is what it was, or that was potentially one of the things that they were hoping to do.
That's what I got.
Yeah, and so he brings it back, and they're trying to set in motion kind of a chain of events, so that they can then go to this prison break or like reignite the fire of the resistance, right? And it doesn't always work out like you would hope it would. So yeah, and I think the artwork was fantastic. But like I said, it was very kind of bleak and desolate. A lot of whites and blues and blacks. Just it was very cold, and I think most of it took place in the winter.
Yeah, I think it was
too,
in
so
the snow.
It worked out well. Yeah. But yeah, do you think that covers it for like the synopsis? Just hey, this is what it was about. Go check it out. Anything you might want to add?
Yeah,
to that?
I think that about sums it up without kind of spoiling it. A note that I had was more of an afterthought. Might be kind of helpful, but it seems like it was this book was trying to kind of show us that even though like bad things can happen, because like you said, not everything goes according to plan,
Right.
it can almost lead to better things, because you see things go kind of terribly wrong for them, but in the end it's something that they can use to possibly gain even more traction,
Yeah, true.
it seems.
Very true. It's a good moral of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. I know this was published originally by Archaea Press, and they usually do really nice hard covers. So I'm sure this one looks fantastic. It's on Comixology Unlimited, which is where we read the book. And actually, I think just yesterday, the creator announced on Twitter that in January 2019, it's getting a soft cover release, which is pretty nice. If you don't want to spend your money on the hardcover, which I'm sure it's only one thing, and so about 150 pages ish. So I'm sure it's not all that much. I'm sure it's around $20 ish if I had to give a ballpark estimate thing. Who knows? But go check it out. Right now we are about to get into some spoilers as we kind of dive in and discuss it, what we liked and didn't like, and what worked and what didn't work, stuff like that. So go check it out if you are not following along at home. And in the meantime, I have one thing of housekeeping to mention for everyone out there. Our RSS feeds have been fixed here at the Whatnauts. We have multiple podcasts. We have this show, we have the Captain's Log, and we have one called the Reactor Core as well. And they used to all be on a single RSS feed, which was The Whatnauts by The Whatnauts. But we have been growing and expanding and stuff like that, so we now made it so that each podcast has its own RSS feed. If you type in The Whatnauts on whatever podcast thing you use, all of our shows will pop up. You'll see the review show, you'll see the Captain's Log, and you'll see the Reactor Core. Go subscribe to all of those, and do not subscribe to The Whatnauts by The Whatnauts, because that one, as of mid-September, which I think is a week or so after this episode goes live, we will stop updating that old feed. It'll be obsolete. So go update that. Make sure you're subscribed to all the right stuff. We will be posting reminders on Twitter and stuff like that when all of that happens. But yeah, that is housekeeping for now. Spoiler territory. Let's dive in. Jess, what did you think? Where do you want to start with this book? You mentioned to me, I think before we started recording, that you had notes that you took. What stood out that you want to mention first?
Yeah, I majored in history, so of course I took notes when reading a book for enjoyment. So it was nice because it was set up in chapters, so I took notes chapter by chapter. Yeah. And the first thing that I noticed is that the blue tones are really lovely. They were done really well. Everything is in a blue tone or in a gray and black tone. And it started out in just blue tones and then switches to kind of the panels alternate it seemingly randomly between the blue and the gray. And that was really interesting to see and think about, like, why were certain panels in set color schemes? I liked it.
Yeah, it was interesting. I loved the artwork. I know we mentioned that before. But yeah, that was something I noticed as well, that it's usually done in these blue tones, but every now and again we'll get these panels that are in like a gray wash instead. It's only in black and white. And at first, because it took me a little bit to figure out what was happening in this book, but I was thinking that maybe all the blue stuff was what's happening in present day, and all the gray stuff was the stuff that was in the past, or like a recent flashback, because it did that on some of the pages where it was like here's what's happening now, and then it, like in the middle of the page or something, it was a flashback. But then that didn't continue later on. So yeah, it was seemingly random that it would switch between those two things.
Yeah.
Which was a little bit confusing.
Yeah. I think a little bit confusing, but also maybe not. Maybe it was only confusing because we were reading it in mind that we had to talk about it. And so we were probably doing that thing that you do in class where you like overanalyze things and they're like, no, I just made it blue
Overanalyzing,
because I
yeah.
like it.
Yeah. It's just like, well, composition wise, I don't want the whole thing blue, you
Yeah.
know? So we'll change it up some.
It's boring.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what we always do, because like we have to walk that fine line on this podcast, I think, because we're not professional critics or anything. We're nobodies. But yeah, like I want to read these and not get jaded and be like, okay, I need to find out what is the hidden meaning behind all of these things and critique it and stuff like that. Whereas I also just want to sit back and like, this is a comic book. I love reading comic books, you know. So it's hard to kind of parse out what's what because of that. But yeah, it still worked. It still looked beautiful.
Yeah.
I at the start of the show I mentioned the whole like Miyazaki Korra stuff. How well do you think that explanation held up?
I think I don't know. I think you're right. The faces are a little bit like Korra-esque, but I think for the most part it's a little more like Miyazaki just because there's all these like it's a lot of background, which I think is kind of the
Yeah.
nature of watercolor. So it's like sort of similar to those, but it really is kind of its whole own thing that I really liked.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that didn't hold up at all. Um, but yeah, like I guess just the mix of because like when I think watercolors, and I know it doesn't have to be this every time, but I feel like watercolors are more lighthearted. They're a little bit more floaty and more fluid, and it's not exact of what an object is, right? You don't work in line work, and there's kind of this almost like ethereal quality about it. And I guess that mixed with like the anthropomorphic thing is kind of what I equated to Miyazaki, where he often has these really like ethereal magical worlds that he creates. And I mean, with as kind of bleak as this comic was during most of it, it still had that kind of magical quality to it. Like I think one of the things that I walked away from with this book was I really want more of this. Like I think that's the one like downside of this book is like once I figured out what was happening, or at least who was who, and I could understand the story that was happening like right there. I was like, I really like these characters. I really like the world, but I know nothing about it. What is this war that they fought? Oh, it was a civil war. There was one character who mentioned it was a civil war. What were they fighting about? You know, what did they lose? I have no idea. And I was like, I want to know that stuff.
Oh yeah, prequel would be so cool.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't then have that animatorly quality that I feel like Korra has, though. So I'm like, oh well.
Like maybe a tiny bit, maybe it influenced it, but probably about it.
Who knows? But yeah, the artwork is is fantastic. I did notice one thing though. While it is mostly in blues and grays, I guess like blue and black, there's a couple splashes of red in there, and I think it's only in there like 3 or 4 times, and 2 or 3 of those times is an image of a cardinal. There's just this red cardinal, and I don't know why that image was in there. It was visually striking. I liked it compositionally, like if each page was a painting of its own, it's like, this is fantastic. I love this. But it was this kind of like it's funny because I live in Virginia and our state bird, if I'm not mistaken, is a cardinal. I could be completely wrong with that and making myself look like an idiot. But so I'm wondering what the symbolism of that bird is. Like, does it represent hope? Does it represent this like undying like will to survive or something like that? I have no idea. I just thought it was an interesting aside because a lot of like filmmakers will do stuff like that where there's a certain scene or they're talking about something and then they'll show you an image that is at first seemingly unrelated, right? But then when you juxtapose the two, it creates some kind of other meaning there. And maybe that's what the creator was going for here, but I don't know. It was just this real like one panel, like here's a cardinal. Who knows?
Yeah.
Move on.
I noticed that too.
And then the second thing I saw that was red. There's a character, the cop, the tiger dude gets punched, and he has his blood. Like on the floor is red as well.
And that was just like a teeny tiny bit of it. I think all the other times was the cardinal.
Yeah. So I'm as weird as it is. I mean, and again, like you mentioned it too. Here we are, like over analyzing this book. I like, what is that cardinal? I'm fascinated. What is this world? What is the war? What is this cardinal? Like, what? I love it.
What is that very thing? Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I did double check. You were right on the state bird thing. That's what is happening for anybody watching at home.
Not
when I
making an ass out of myself.
Look over, is I've got my one laptop to record, and then I took the notes on this on a different laptop, so I've got 2 going. Yeah, I noticed it in like chapter 2. I have a note. I'm just like, what is with this bird? It seems like it was after every time there was like a terrible thing happened, but I mean, I could be totally reading into it way too much because there was like a lot of terrible things that happened in this book. So
yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I was gonna start to dive into the plot, but I can't. Before we do that, I want to know if you had a favorite character.
Yeah. So I really liked Pavel, and I really liked Giles as well. Which one of those?
Giles the goat.
Yes.
And Pavel was the crow.
He was some sort of bird. I wasn't sure which.
He was the cop that they were like, you're a coward, you're a traitor, right?
He's the one they thought he was a traitor, and I really liked him because his counterpart, Angle the tiger, was honestly like straight up kind of a dick. Actually, not straight up kind of, like was. He was the worst. And Pavel just like...
Side note, I'm wondering if Angle is his last name and his first name is something with a B. So his initials would be B. Angle. It'd be a Bengal tiger.
No, that would be great, but his first name is Calvin. There's a letter in the very... There's this side note to the side note. There's this really interesting thing that happens. Chapter 1 is the only chapter that doesn't follow sort of this formula. Not that that's a bad thing, but like after chapter 2, every chapter starts with a letter to a character from another character, and the final chapter, the epilogue,
which
starts...
is fascinating.
Yeah. The epilogue starts with a letter from Angle to his father, who was apparently like also in the military, and I had two notes about that, which was that his signature looks like a child's signature, which I think is interesting because he's trying to be this, big, tough military guy, and he was very like, honestly, it reminded me of like dictator speeches. It was not good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, he's definitely like a dick, straight up. And Pablo just like didn't let it get to him. He like, he kept calling him a traitor and all these terrible things, and he's like, I didn't do that, and I'm just gonna like walk away from you. At one point, he just literally like fires his gun so that he doesn't have any bullets to fight Angle with, and like walks away. And I admired that. It was
he's a much stronger person, but at the same time appears very meek and smaller, right?
Yeah.
I liked I guess his name was Pavel. I'm always terrible with names on this show. I'm always like, I like the one dude that did this one thing, that guy. So yeah, I liked Pavel. I think he had one of the more fascinating, like despite how short this book is, there's a lot of character development in like not much time at all.
Oh my gosh.
Which I was like, this is awesome. But yeah, I think he had one of the more fascinating developments of where we were introduced to him, and then where he ended up. He had one I was like, I really like him, because I mean, he has this, he's kind of getting bullied by this guy, but he knows who he is, right? Like he has his own integrity, and actually he ends up, depending on which side you're on, he's kind of the hero of the story, and because he in that scene where he's pissed off at Engel, he shoots his gun up in the air, and that's when his seemingly stray random shot kills that first character, that first rabbit that we're introduced to. Again, I don't remember his name, and they don't know it, and it's like that moment in the story is like, oh shit, because when it happened, I was like, oh, I bet you something went wrong. Like they shot him, and he's gonna be like, like, huh, who's up there? Or like he was gonna bleed and was gonna like drip through the floor or something. But yeah, the two cops leave, and Giles just goes upstairs, and he's like, you can see it, like it's like a first person perspective of him like walking down the hallway about to enter the room, and you're just like, oh shit, they killed him, didn't they?
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, I didn't think about that at all, because the panel where Pablo shoots his gun, there you don't see anything above him, and it's a little bit separate from everything else. So I was like, I don't know what I thought, but I definitely wasn't thinking about the fact that he just shot straight up in a house. Like, who does that? And then, Giles walks in, and the last panel of that issue is somebody being like, oh no. And so my notes are just, there is bad news bears, but we don't know what. Because I hadn't figured it out. And then you start chapter 2, and they're like burying him. And I was like, but I thought this was about him. And so it's like, maybe he's not actually dead, but he 100% was,
I was like, oh, they're killing off the main character. Interesting.
Like, oh, right. Well, and while we're talking about Pavel, and that I think that part of what makes his storyline and his character arc seem so, I can't remember what you said earlier, he grows a lot, but I think part of the reason it seems like that is because when he's getting accused of being a traitor, like, we don't really know what's what, and so it feels like the book kind of sets you up to think, oh, maybe, like, to think that he actually is, because for a hot second it sure seems like he is. So when we find out that he wasn't, and then in the end, he says this really good line, and I should have bookmarked the page, but he says the line, something along the lines to the tiger, he's like, you made fun of me for never shooting my gun, but I shot one time, and now there's like this kid in trouble because turns out the rabbit Hardin has 2 kids, and his son, who is, I call him Junior in my notes because his name is also James.
Sure, yeah.
He's like, the tiger I think hits him because he's so angry that
that
he
was his
didn't lie in court to him. And so Pablo's
Yeah.
like, see what happens? And I was just like, whoa.
Yeah, it was like,
Real-
oh shit,
real-
shots fired.
Oh, real and not real.
Yeah, no, I was getting major like Peter Parker, Uncle Ben vibes. Like he let the robber go. It's like, well, not my job. It's like, and you see where that got us. Now he has the plans, and now they're gonna do this and that, you know. And so yeah, I like it seems like it was something that he was very much dealing with, of like, did I actually screw up? Like I don't think I did. Like, I did the right thing, you know. Like I tried my very best to stop this, but he still got away, you know. And yeah, it like for him, if you're more rooting for his side of things, he ends up kind of being the hero in the sense of like, see, I was right. Like I am not a coward. I am not a traitor. I, though without knowing it, ended up doing the right thing. We caught this guy, you know. But at the same time, it's also like, well, you killed the guy. You didn't know it. And that's also something that's interesting about this book. Since they don't get into what the war was about, we don't know which side was right or wrong. And so, yeah, like I think if this had been a longer book, I feel like most of it would have been from either the perspective of like one of the rabbits, like like it would have been entirely from the perspective of Junior, with like the B plot following the 2 cops, or it would have been following the cops with the B plot being this like this resistance, you know. And again, we don't know what the belief systems of each of these sides have, so you can technically root for both of them.
Yeah.
But they all do some terrible stuff, but you know, but yeah.
It was really interesting, that bit, for me, because it's like it never really comes right out and says this side is the good side or this side is the bad side. But for me,
Right.
I got the vibe from the beginning that Pavel and Engel's side was the bad side, especially like once Engel started being a total dick. But
yeah,
on the other hand, Hardin, who was our main character,
root for the underdog.
Yeah, and on the other hand, Hardin, who was our main character, he has these plans to blow up a train with like 500 people in it, and they eventually do that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, like I really don't know. Also, sorry if I'm accidentally cutting you off. I can hear you just fine, but the video's like 10 seconds behind.
Okay. No, you're totally fine. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where, yeah, each side has its own characters that you can root for, and things that they've all done. That's like, this is a war. They've all done terrible stuff. So are they really worth rooting for? You know. So it's hard to figure out what to, you know, which side to root for, which is an interesting approach, especially in like today's, I guess, political climate around comics. Especially, I guess we're recording this like end of August 2018, and there's a whole bunch of stuff right now on comics Twitter about the whole Comics Gate stuff, which is no fun. But yeah, I mean, there's this whole idea of like, like comics shouldn't be political. Like, don't make all of that stuff political. It's like, well, they've always been. Everything you do is political, dumbass. But yeah, it's so weird that that's happening for us right now in real life. And here's a book where we actually don't see anyone's politics, really. I mean, we kind of do, but again, not enough to know like which side is right or wrong, which is an interesting take.
Yeah. One note on the whole Comicsgate thing, which, by the way, to anybody who's like on the fence, personally, I think it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. One of, if not the.
Yeah.
As somebody who was a history major and wrote my thesis on comics, like, to those people who are like, oh, they shouldn't be political, I just want them to read the first comic that Marvel ever put out and that DC ever put out, and just like tell me how that's not political. Like, do they know who Captain America is? Have they not seen that really iconic? It just blows my mind. They're like, oh, it shouldn't be political. Like, he punches Hitler.
Seen Captain America punching Hitler? Yeah.
Like, this. Do you know like anything about the founders of these? Yeah. Comics is a very political thing, and it always has been for multiple reasons.
All art has been.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much. You're making some statement, or whether or not it's bold or it's subtle or it's your own thought or it's paid for by someone else, it doesn't matter. Your thoughts make up your political beliefs. If you don't want anything political, you can't have any thought.
Yeah. Well,
none whatsoever.
None. You are a robot. There's this thing that I've noticed, especially like with the current election, to go on a tiny little side note, is that people like, they say don't get political in lieu of figuring out how to have tough conversations. Because I'm friends with people who are, I'm not conservative, I'm very liberal, and I'm friends with people who are conservative, and I can be their friend and we can talk about things and we can talk about politics. You just have to learn how to talk about it like a decent human being, and also like where the line is where, okay, this is past politics, and really it's just, this is a terrible thing that you should not condone, whether or not you identify with like this party or this person or whatever. People don't know how to talk to each other, basically.
Sure. Amen to that.
Anyways.
But yeah, all right, so we've kind of mentioned favorite characters. I said Pavel for mine. You mentioned him as well. I liked Giles. Mm-hmm. But I was more interested in the relationship between Junior and his sister.
Yeah.
Because that was a fascinating one too, where they're both super young. They don't really understand everything that's happening. Their father dies at the end of issue 1, mm-hmm. And again, yeah, like it's not really registering for them, you know. At the same time, James Harden Jr., his name was James, right? Yeah. James Jr. Mm-hmm. He kind of idolizes his dad, right? Mm-hmm. It sounded like their mother was out of the picture as well.
I think there's a line about him. Giles says something about him laying next to Tabitha, so I think she's dead first.
Okay.
I think.
Yes, that's correct. Now I remember that. Yeah, so he's kind of idolizing his father, who's supposedly this like hero of the resistance, mm-hmm. And so he immediately is like, well, now my dad's gone, now I have to step up and be the hero of the resistance, when he's like 12 years old, or who knows, you know. So he ends up making these like bold, rash decisions that gets him in a lot of trouble, and he's basically the one that sets the bomb on this train, mm-hmm. Except he doesn't really know the plan, so he sets it at the wrong time, you know. They're like, oh shit. And yeah, so like he ends up having that like stereotypical kind of male bravado of just like, well, I'm gonna fight the war too, you know. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go do the manly thing and join the war. And I guess stereotypically, yeah, like that's seen as much stronger, and his sister is like, well, war is stupid, like I don't want to fight, you know, this is dumb, and that's often seen as just a lot weaker, mm-hmm. right? And by the end of the book, when Junior is basically captured and is about to be put on trial, he's like, I'm not the strong one. My sister is the strong one. Like, I'm the one that followed in my father's footsteps like an idiot, you know. But she's the one that like is much more like my father, and you know, won't tell of all of these secrets and stuff like that. She would have been the one to like stand up and lie to your face and stuff like that. But here I am folding under the pressure, being like, no, I have to tell the truth here, you know? So yeah, I liked their relationship a lot.
Yeah, they definitely had a super interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought this was really interesting to read because I lost my mom when I was 10, just in like a house fire. So nothing, you know, which is still a tragedy, but nothing like this, you know, where Junior he knows the cause, he has somebody to be mad at. But I just found his reaction versus his sister Patricia's reaction, like they were polar opposites, and they were really interesting. And I'm just like, Junior was one of my least favorite characters, because it was like, how could you be so stupid? Like, I understand where you're coming from. I understand you're upset, but you're like a teenager at oldest, and you're just gonna like go set a bomb out. And yeah, like it's a huge lash out. And the thing that I think, like, he's really the reason they end up in this orphanage later on, because Giles and this frog or toad, I could not tell which, who they know, Timothy, who's a very minor character, they get on the train. Giles brings the kids because Junior tricks him into it, essentially. And Junior sets the bomb off early, and so they lose both Giles and Timothy all in one go, and they don't know how to contact their Aunt Charlotte. Like, they have to jump off the train in the middle of the snow. We find out later.
It messes up their plan. They don't get to blow up the bridge. They can't do the prison break thing.
Like,
it fucks up their whole
he screws up everything game. And then continues to like try and think that he knows better than his sister. And it's like, did you don't realize that you landed yourselves in an orphan? Like, part of me understands, like, losing a parent is really hard, and I bet especially if you've already lost one. But also part of me is just like, this is ridiculous, and this is the epitome of like teenage boy angst and anger and like not knowing how to deal with that.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. So we've kind of mentioned a bunch of the plot stuff here and there as we've been talking about this, but yeah. So Junior wants to be involved somehow. I don't think he knows what he's getting involved with right away. No. He just knows that Giles is about to go off and do something, and he likes Giles more than whoever was babysitting them, air quotes. And so he's just like, this is stupid. I don't want to stay here. I'm going to go with Giles. And they're like, no, you can't go. So he's supposed to deliver a letter to Giles that has information about the plan. And he opens it up and he changes it and writes his own thing, which, I mean, tells you how valuable his forgery skills could be to the resistance, right? Yeah, so he changes it so that him and his sister get to go with Giles, and unfortunately Giles, because the mission is coming down to this one instance, doesn't really have the luxury to say no. He's just like, all right, well, shit, like, that's what we have to do, and so that's what he does. He brings these two kids onto this train that they are about to blow up. I mean, it's originally they're supposed to set the bomb and jump off so that they'll make it alive. But that's when everything goes wrong.
Yes, very wrong.
Yeah, and it issue 2 kind of ended in that same cliffhanger where they don't really show you what's happening. I mean, they do, because I think they show the train blowing up, and it's like, I want to say like 1,000 feet, like just before where it was supposed to be, right?
You can see the bridge in front of it.
Yeah, but it's still this. There's this moment between Giles and the Toad guy, that they're like, oh shit, we can hear them in there. Like, the kids are in there. What the hell? Like, we are in some deep doo doo now. And like, to me, that moment was a similar kind of moment of the like, oh no, something happened upstairs. And I was just like, ooh, this is a good cliffhanger. I like it. I don't like it, but I do.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah.
You're like, I love this, but also I hate this. Please give me more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then it went on from there. There was issue 3 was the whole thing with the orphanage, which was kind of fascinating too, because that one focused more on the sister.
Yes.
So let's dive into that one, because I think that was even an interesting story too. Like, as it's crazy, because we read a comic a couple weeks ago that was only 6 issues long, and it was one of those things. Was like, yeah, I wish we had more, but they didn't do a great job of like telling the story in that short amount of time. It was like, I didn't get enough to really understand what was happening or to latch on to the characters or stuff like that. But this one, like, amazingly enough, like they pack so much into each thing, and it's a little bit longer issues, because it's only 4 issues if I'm not mistaken, but they're each like 30 to 40 pages. But I feel like I feel like I could see this story being pulled out to like 60-ish issues, and me just absolutely loving it and be like, this is so good, this is fascinating. But they do this whole story about them in the orphanage, and she, again, I forget her name, the Hardin sister,
Patricia.
Patricia, thank you. You're on top of it. Look at you taking notes and everything. And she ends up meeting this boy who's also an orphan. His father died in the war. He was an interesting character to me. Did you understand what his story was?
Yeah, so I think what it was, because this kid was getting bullied, his dad fought for the same side as Engel and Pavel, which they said briefly like what they were called, and I don't remember. I think like the regime or something.
Yeah,
the
regime.
I don't know if I said that word right.
The Empire.
Yeah, the bad guys, but they also said that he was a traitor. So I think like his dad either was a traitor or was somebody who was kind of scapegoated into being a traitor. I
got the vibe he was a spy.
Yeah, his dad might have been.
I got the vibe that his dad actually worked for the side that lost, but was like a long game spy, and he got found out, and that's why you're a traitor, blah blah blah, you know. And so that's why he's getting bullied. But then at the same time, it might not be, because when the whole kind of romance idea comes up, which they don't explore really, but you get the idea, like, she kind of likes him, she's gonna go run off with him, you know. I don't remember what he says exactly, but I think he says something along the lines of there's this tension between them, and I think he says something along the lines of like, so you're still gonna talk to me despite like our differences, like our beliefs and stuff like that. I don't know. He might not have said something like that specifically, but I got that vibe from him as well. Which, again, he's a kid, so he might not know the ins and outs of what exactly happened.
Yeah. If his dad was a good spy, he probably didn't know his dad was a spy.
Yeah, who knows?
Also, I thought it was really interesting. A minute or two ago, you said that you felt like this chapter focuses on Patricia, the sister, but I kind of thought I viewed it as through the lens of watching Junior. And here's why. So each of the chapters has an alternate title. So chapter 1 is chapter 1, or The Thief, and it's all about Hardin Sr., who steals those papers. And then chapter 2 is The Coward, which is a little more, it's sort of, there's a lot going on in that one.
More about Giles.
Yeah, it's sort of about Giles and how he's like, oh, I'm not ready to do anything, and then he has to. And then chapter 3 is The Child, and so I thought it was kind of about James Jr. because I thought he was acting like a child, even though he's supposed to be older. And I kind of viewed it as watching him react to his sister and kind of try to be an adult and fail miserably, because what happens is, they meet this kid. I also, one of my notes that I'm reading, I was like, Junior and Pat are in kid prison, ? Because it's like barbed wire fences, and so I was like, is there like a child prison? But really, it's just a terrible orphanage. But like, Junior makes friends with the kids who are bullying this kid. I think his name is Constantine, I don't know. He was a wolf.
Something like that.
And Pat makes friends with him because she's just like, I'm sick of all of this like macho bullshit. And then when they talk about running away, there's a part of the fence where two kids can pull it open and run away, and Patricia's like, hey brother, like, let's get out of here, and he's like, no, there's nowhere to go, we have to stay here. And he finds out that she's gonna run away anyways and gets his friends to beat up the wolf kid, and that's when the wolf calls him a coward, and Patricia's like, you're nothing like our father, and he would be ashamed of you. And then they actually do run away. And it was real interesting because, I was viewing it as kind of like all of his stupid reactions to everything going on.
Yeah. What was the 4th chapter called?
That one's...
Do you have that written down as well?
Yeah, that one's The Patriot, which...
The Patriot.
I think is more about... That one starts with... The child starts with a letter from Giles, and I was kind of like, oh, it's because he's most likely dead. And then The Patriot starts with a letter from Patricia, which she signs with her first and last name, and it's to her father, so I thought it was really cute. It's like, to Daddy, love, Patricia Hardin.
Okay, because there's the story seems to be filled with a lot of those kind of double entendre, double meaning things, right? Because you said chapter 2 was The Coward, which I had said that's more about Giles, but then you and I also just had that discussion of, Junior is also kind of the coward in that one. You know, it focuses on him being like, well, I'm going to follow in my daddy's footsteps, and I'm going to go do this. And it's this kind of, it's him lashing out because I think he's scared. He doesn't really know what to do. He is the one being the coward. Which I guess brings up my next question. The name of this book, then. It follows the same naming convention as these chapters. What does the war after mean, then?
So I feel like that is mostly just about, like... Oh, okay, I see what you're saying now. It's clicking. So I feel like it's supposed to be like...
Wheels are turning.
Oh, it's after the war, but why wouldn't you put after before? But it's like... There's a lot of conversation between Engel and Pavel about they're like, the war is over. Like, you need to stop acting like it's still here because Engel is acting like it is. And so also kind of like this second war of just like dealing with the aftermath in this tiny little, maybe not so tiny, this rebellion that could be any size. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's also, I'm going to try and scroll through and find it, but if I can't focus on both things, then I'll stop. But there's this really interesting quote from, I think, Pavel about iron and the different kinds of strengths that it has. And I was like, hey, title drop, because title's only like one word without the little subtitle. but also my computer is
Yeah.
like the slowest thing in the world, so we may not get there. But yeah, it's really interesting. And I kind of thought, thinking about the Patriot, like, I thought at first with that letter from Patricia, I was like, oh, it's going to be about her and how she's actually, like, following more in her father's footsteps in the way that he would want. But it also seems to be kind of about Angle, and it leads to kind of his downfall because of his big-headedness, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, and again, to put someone else's name in there, it's also kind of about Junior realizing it's like, hey, I'm not the strong one, but I'm going to do the right thing here, which, is quote unquote patriotic,
Yeah, which he cites his sister for. He's like, she was right, I'm not doing the right thing, and this is what she would do, so this is what I'm going to do. And it turns things around.
Yeah, it seems it seems to me like the idea of the war after. Yes, it literally takes place after the war has quote unquote ended. But we see a lot of people dealing with stuff. It seems to be about coping, or how, I made this decision. This is the consequence. I now have to deal with those consequences. So yeah, I mean, it just I'm sure you've made some kind of decision or said something to someone, and just for the week afterwards, you can think of nothing else. But you're like, did I do the right thing? Did I? Do they hate me now? And it's kind of like this war of the mind of just like overthinking stuff. Did I, did I do the right thing? Did I make the right decision? Did I make the right call? And I think that's kind of what it's about. And you mentioned something at the start of this, of what the moral of the story is. It's like, even if something goes wrong, sorry, my phone just buzzed here. Even if something goes wrong, like, there's this idea of, well, good stuff can still come from that. Like, you don't have to give up right away. Like, good things can still come. It might be better than you expected. You never know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting as well. And then of course, the more like literal sense of, like, if you're testing your metal, right, that's like how well you hold up under pressure. And so yeah, just the idea of like, hey, here's the decisions you made, how well can you stand by those?
Yeah, and I think
Who knows?
there's almost one more direction like the war after could take, but that we don't get to because it is shorter. But like, they've been in a war, they probably have some sort of PTSD, and like, these Hardin's kids, James and Patricia, like, they have been through some shit. And so I feel like part of it is also like how they deal with that aftermath, and we only see a tiny little chunk of it. Seems like maybe we see like a couple weeks to a month afterwards, but we don't see like the long term. But I think it kind of evokes that, like, think about that as you think about this as well.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Good stuff. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I liked it a lot. The book that I saw from this creator that like inspired me to pick this one was called Iscariot.
Ooh.
It's another kind of graphic novel that this creator did. It looked more like magical and kind of Harry Potter-ish meets like high fantasy knights and stuff like that. It looked really cool. I think the main character was a young girl who had a cat companion, if I'm not mistaken. But it looked neat. But that also had that, like, this same like watercolor style. So I'm interested to check that book out as well.
I'm
and see
Always.
what that is. It's on Comixology Unlimited too.
Ooh.
So,
I'm always super interested in anything that takes Iscariot for the title because I feel like that's not a name that's chosen super lightly.
yeah.
I grew up in a Baptist household and then went to a private Catholic school, so like Judas Iscariot is super well known for being like the betrayer, and it's something that's really interesting to grow up thinking about and talking about because it's like, okay, they tell you that God has a plan for everybody. But God's plan for this guy is that he's going to betray Jesus, leading to the whole big shebang, and then hang himself, which, in the Catholic Church, especially suicide, is like a huge no. And
Yeah.
so it's like he kind of gets the short end of the stick, but apparently it's God's will. And so like kind of reconciling that and thinking about that, it's still something that like I think about a lot and is super fascinating to me. And so any like piece of art that uses the title or in the phrase Iscariot, I'm like, oh, what are they alluding to? Because they are there's a good chance they are alluding to something.
Yeah.
And it's usually quite fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm this is now a creator, like I hadn't heard of this guy's comics beforehand, and I'm not sure. Let me see if I can look them up on the good old interwebs here.
Ooh.
So I'm not sure what they're working on now. Let's see. Come on, interwebs. SM Vidori. Google go.
Go.
What was on their website? They have a website. smvidori.com. I hope I'm saying your name right. If you're listening to
If you
this.
hear this and we're saying it wrong, we're so sorry.
Yeah. Let's see. Graphic novels. Honor the War After an Iscariot. Single issues and short comics. Jim Henson's Storyteller Witches #1. 5 Ghosts Special #1. Songs Illustrated. Josh Ritter's Henrietta, Indiana. Adventure Time Comics #3. Writing. I'm on their website right now. Cool. It looks like they're working on. I don't know how recent this is. It looks pretty recent. Looks like they're working on some Steven Universe comics, as well as a book called Death Saves from 2015. Yeah, Steven Universe is the stuff from 2018, so that is very recent. Some old Adventure Time comics from 2017. I guess that's not old at all. That's pretty cool. Comics and illustrations. Sweet. Well, let me ask you this, Jess. Now that you've read this book, was there something this reminded you of that you would recommend if they liked this? Go check out said other thing.
Yeah, this is probably going to be something that everybody has either read in high school or middle school, but I'm going to say it anyways. I would recommend Mouse. It's very similar. It's
Interesting.
I can't remember his last name, but I can remember his first. Oh, Art Spiegelman, and it was I think one of the first comics to win like a book award and not a comic award. So it was this really big deal. But it's about.
It's literary comics.
Yes, it was the people who were like,
in
oh,
quotations.
yeah. Which is this whole other thing that I could talk forever and ever about how people think that comics like don't make your kids smarter, but guess what they do. But it's about World War II, and it's basically his grandfather's story, but it's the same anthropomorphic. It's mice and cats instead of people.
Yep.
And it's the same kind of like it's deep and it makes you question things. And I also think it's really interesting using animal characters instead of people when talking about things like with the war. I don't know why this person chose to use it, but that's 2 books I've seen so far that do it, and it's always really neat when they do.
Yes. I think that's a good pick. To continue on the anthropomorphic train, there was a book, actually I have it, hold on, I have it right over here. Here we go. It is Wild's End by Dan Abnett and what is this other guy's first name? I don't know off the top of my head. Dan Abnett and I.N.J. Colbard. Basically, it is a kind of anthropomorphic retelling of War of the Worlds.
Ooh.
And it's actually a really, really good book. I've only seen this first volume. I think there's a second one out there, but they also do that really cool thing where in between each issue there's some kind of extra material that just kind of builds the world, whether it's like a photocopy of a newspaper page from their thing, or like the notebook of the journalist character that's out there, you know. So I would recommend that book as well, and that's published by Boom Studios. So go check that out as well. Yeah. Any last words before we start doing pitches for this next week? I have some more stuff to pitch for you, Jess.
I thought the art was really pretty. I really liked it. I am trying to find that one quote that I don't think I'm going to find, and I came across one of my favorite, which was the title page for chapter 2 is in a rectangle in the gray tones. It's the rabbit Hardin laying in an open coffin, and then it's on a background of an angel with the wings and the hands together, and where the angel's head would be is the rabbit. It's really neat. So lots of cool stuff like that, and I thought it was really thought-provoking. Just kind of like makes you think about the world and why people do things they do, and good versus bad, that kind of thing. How much that's actually a thing.
Yeah. Go check it out. It's on Comixology Unlimited right now. I'm sure if you guys have a local comic book store, you can find it as well. Or if you want to wait till January 2019, you can pick up the soft cover, supposedly. But yeah, I really liked this book. I'm definitely, I'm hoping you make more of this book, because I would love that. But yeah, go check it out. That is that. So I mentioned at the start of this episode, Jess, that normally Melissa and I will take turns like pitching stuff to one another. We'll have 3 options, and then we pick one of those 3 things from those choices, and that's what we do the next week here on the podcast. This past week, I pitched those to you off mic because Melissa was just like, well, I'm not going to be here. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to find a substitute and put this information in post-production, stuff like that. So I did. I let people know. But I have 3 options for you to pick again, because I just asked you earlier today if you wanted to be on the show again with me this next week. So hopefully you want to come back and you're not sitting here like, oh God, this was horrible.
No, it was great. I drank a little too much seltzer water, so I have to pee, but that's okay. That's on me.
I know the feeling. But yeah, so let me pull these up here. I have a comic book, a Netflix TV series. It's only 10 episodes long, and I think they're half an hour each. So it's not super long. And then an animated movie.
Ooh.
In animated movie. It's redundant, but sure. Yes. So the first pitch I want to do is the comics. Jess, you actually may have seen this in Comixology when you opened it up. I've been reading a whole bunch of the Valiant comics from when they relaunched in like 2013-ish, 2012, 2013-ish. And I just started reading one called Archer and Armstrong.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, and I want to pitch the first 3 volumes of that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, all 3 of those are on Comixology Unlimited as well. But yeah, so in the Valiant universe of comics, but if you guys aren't checking out Valiant comics and you like superhero stuff, you are doing yourself a disservice. Not very many people talk about them, and they are making some great stuff. But Archer and Armstrong is about this kid who grew up in a cult, and he is sent to New York to hunt down and kill like this. I guess I'm not super far in, so I'm not sure exactly what they think he is, but I'm assuming they think he's like some version of the devil, or the sin incarnate, or something. And so it's his first time leaving the compound of this cult, and he finds the guy he's supposed to kill in this seedy bar up in New York, and he ends up basically becoming this guy's partner instead of killing him, because this guy is kind of immortal, and so you can't kill him, and so he's like, well, I'm gonna stick around for the right moment, but in the meantime, let's go on some adventures and stuff like that. So the kid is his name is Archer. His first name is something else, I believe, but he's like martial arts master, knows how to do all of that stuff, but is very much in this like, the world is evil, like sinners all around me, I need to protect myself with kung fu. And Armstrong is an immortal who's been around for a long time, so he's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna do whatever I want. This means like, the world means nothing, your life means nothing, or just go do whatever you want, have fun, so it's an interesting mix to see those two go on adventures side by side. So that's pitch number 1.
Okay.
Pitch number 2 is Disenchantment. It is a new Netflix original show by the creator of The Simpsons and Futurama, and it seems to be his take on like fantasy and Game of Thrones type of stuff, and putting his spin and brand of comedy on that. So I'm interested to check it out. It's brand new on Netflix. Came out by the time this goes public, like a week or so ago, week or two ago. I never watched The Simpsons growing up. I caught episodes here and there. I liked Futurama a lot, but I never watched it consistently. So I think that since it's all on Netflix, this whole first season, which is only 10 episodes long, I think, why not dive into one of those? You're smiling.
I'm like making faces
because
I'm already like 3 episodes into that.
Okay.
So I know this one, and I've been enjoying it so far. So yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. And pitch number 3. In case you haven't already made up your mind, is an anime movie called Flavors of Youth. It's by the same studio. Have you heard of an anime movie called Your Name?
I don't think I have. I am
no?
not hip with
Okay.
the anime.
Supposedly there's an anime movie called Your Name that is, or I guess last year or the year before, won a whole bunch of awards. It's like a lot of people are saying like this is one of like the must-see movies. Like if you watch anything anime, this needs to be one of them. And it's not even, it's also making people's list for just like, you need to watch this movie, period, like before you die. So this is another movie by that same studio, and it seems to be 3 separate stories about 3 different people all living in the same city.
Okay.
I can't tell if their stories intertwine or not, or how they intersect. which kind of has me fascinated. Of they don't tell you if they do or not. So I'm wondering, like, yeah, do they cross up? Do they all know each other? Do they all culminate in one big thing, or is it this kind of thing like one person's story couldn't happen without the other person, even though they don't really know about each other? It's just the like circumstances worked out perfectly that this guy did this one thing so that this girl over here could do, you know, a certain thing. But it looks good. I believe it's I don't think it's a Netflix original. I could be wrong though. But the like trailer that pops up on the automatic Netflix trailer play thing. God, we hated it in MySpace. Why do they make things play automatically?
It's the worst.
On Netflix. It is. Especially when you forget how loud your TV is.
It's always so loud.
It's like,
it's like I don't need this because I'm trying to figure out what I want to watch, and it's not that, so I don't want to hear about it right now.
Exactly, but the trailer for this looked good. It looked intriguing. So yeah, those are my 3 pitches for this next week. Archer and Armstrong Volumes 1 through 3 from Valiant Comics, Disenchantment Season 1, which is on Netflix, and The Flavors of Youth, which is also on Netflix, but is a movie. What do you want to do, Jess? Take your pick.
I don't know, because so I've already started watching Disenchanted, and it's fun, but I was also definitely watched the first 3 episodes while filling out applications, so I was only like 50% paying attention. So I'd probably want to start over. But Archer and Armstrong also sounds like that kind of like trope is right up my alley.
Okay.
I'm just gonna make really weird noises into my mic and make everybody uncomfortable. That's what I'm gonna do.
That's A-okay.
Let's do Disenchanted.
To your podcast.
Or Disenchantment. I already forgot.
Disenchantment, I believe. That's what I wrote down.
Let's do that one to change things up.
Isn't there a movie already called Disenchanted? It's like that, like live action Disney, or DreamWorks or something, like animation to live action thing.
That one is Enchanted.
Do you know what I'm thinking of?
And it's Disney, and I love it. It has one of my favorite Disney songs of all time. Also a cute squirrel. It's got Amy Adams before she was like super huge, and also
I don't know who that is.
She's a redhead. She was the purse girl on The Office. That's all the other thing I know her from.
Purse girl.
And also,
I haven't seen The Office in a long time, so
it's from like the first.
Love
season.
that show, but
so good. And it's also got Patrick. I don't know his last name, but I think he's in Grey's Anatomy, and everybody always calls him McDreamy. And I don't know if that's his actual name or not, but like he is good looking.
McDreamy.
I've never seen an episode of the show. Anyways, yes, Enchanted. It's a really good movie. But yeah, let's do that to change things up.
Disenchantment.
Yes.
Is what we will do for this next week. Sounds good. I haven't heard much on this show yet, so I don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned I never really watched The Simpsons growing up and watched Futurama only sparingly.
I've never seen Futurama. And I've only caught like a couple episodes of The Simpsons growing up.
Futurama's good. It's fantastic. But yeah, sweet. So if you guys are following along at home, that is on Netflix. So you guys can watch it. Pretty much everyone and their mom has a Netflix account. So you guys can follow along. And if you don't, you're probably using someone else's mom's account. So there you go. But yeah, that's what we will be talking about for this next week. Jess, you are going to be joining me again as Melissa is unpacking her house and getting settled into her new place. So that'll be exciting to have you on back to back.
I'm excited. You guys can get used to me and then I'll disappear.
Where can the people find you if they want to get in touch with you on the interwebs?
Yes, so you can find me on Twitter. I am Legend of Jess with an underscore in between on either side of. That's the best way to explain it. Legend_of_Jess. And then I'm also on Instagram, which is honestly mostly just pictures of my cute cat and pictures that Eric Mannix tagged me.
You do have a very cute cat.
He's precious.
You showed us on the captain's log a couple days ago.
He's precious.
So.
We got him a tall cat tower and he loves it.
Sokka.
Yes, his name is Sokka. Anyways, I found my Instagram and remembered the name. It's Accio, like in Harry Potter, ACCIO. Jess Beaver, which is BEV, like violin, ER. There is no A. If you put in an A, it's not. You won't find me. So.
I was so worried the first time that I said it out loud. I was like, and Jess Beaver is also a new member of the Whatnauts.
I was so happy you got it right.
I don't actually know if that's her name. It could be Bever because it's just 2 E's. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, so I got it right the first time. Thank God. Cool. Well, yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at Hush315. And you can find updates for all of our podcasts at the Whatnauts on Twitter as well. Thank you guys for joining us in the live stream. You guys can watch this live normally every Sunday Sunday at noon Eastern time. However, we probably won't be live streaming at that time next week because you're probably going to be busy at that time.
I will be in the church.
So yes, we might stick to what we did this week and record on Monday evenings. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have a whole bunch of different podcasts. So if you like this one or any of the other ones we do, we would absolutely love your support. You can go to patreon.com/thewhatnauts. And give us $1. And as I'm saying that, I realize I completely forgot to say where you can catch our live streams just 2 seconds ago. So let me rewind. You can get our live streams at thewhatnauts.com/live streams. thewhatnauts.com/live streams. Or twitch.tv/thewhatnauts. And yeah, you guys can watch it live. If you missed that, that is A-okay. This goes up as a podcast and on YouTube the following week. And yeah, if you sign up on Patreon, you get all the episodes early and stuff like that. Good stuff. Cool. That is it. Disenchantment for this next week. This has been the Captain's Log episode 22. Thank you guys.
Review show.
Fuck, man. The review show. This has been the review show, episode 22. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you guys next week.
Bye.